into home stretch.
Good
You
to
have
see
been
you.
amazing. And we've had such great presentations all day. Just so thankful for the couples that have joined us today.
Yeah, that's right. So we wanted to point out a couple things. One of them is that in your workbook here that we sent you, you'll notice 2 pages. One is what men wish women knew, and that's kind of for the guys, right? I have it backwards. I always get this backwards. What men wish women knew.
For the women.
This is for the women, right?
For
There
the
we
women.
go.
Okay. That's okay.
What's my problem?
That's
Okay.
fine.
What men wish, and so I went through about 25 different surveys and kind of made a compilation of the 8 top things that I noticed were common to all of them. And so that's there for you. And then on the other page, what women wish men knew. And there you go.
For the men.
That's for the men.
Yeah.
So
read those together and think
yeah.
about it. Maybe you could read them separately at some point, and it's really good to communicate
Right.
about those. There are some aha moments for us. And sometimes Patrick said, yeah, that's not really something I want you to know about me. But other times he'd be like, yeah, that's really something that's important to me as a man.
And one of the things, this is not to be stereotypical. It has nothing to do with that. These are lists, are kind of an accumulation of, like I said, about 25 different surveys of men and women. And so this is not something that some scientists came up with. This is actual people saying these things. So that's what it is. Okay, just so you know. So to wrap up today, basically, we're going to be talking about faith, and you've heard about that quite a bit today. So we're going to be filling in some places that things that you maybe didn't hear about. We'll be talking about some of those things, and we're going to pull up a PowerPoint here and just kind of show you a few things. Okay, so.
Like the Funesteins and the Spaniels have just woven together some great faith stories and how their marriages need faith and how it's helped their relationships. Patrick and I also have found that to be very true.
Yeah. And the sacrament of matrimony, that's what the sacrament is actually called, sacrament of matrimony. Wanted to talk about a couple things. One is a contract. Everybody knows what a contract is. You guys are all involved with different contracts. You have cell phones, you have leases. Everybody knows what a contract is. And a contract basically is, I'll just give you a couple of parameters. The contract is both parties come together and they each do 50%. So you walk up to your side of the contract and you say, okay, I'm going to pay for my cell phone every month, right? And the cell phone company walks up to their side of the line and say, okay, we'll give you service every month. And as long as both sides are fulfilling their side of the contract, it's fine. Everything works great. But contracts are based on mistrust. Just try stopping paying for your cell phone and see if the cell phone company keeps providing service. Just try it. They won't because it's a contract. It's based on mistrust. Each side does 50%. And if I don't do my half of it, then they don't have to do their half. The contract is broken. Well, in the state of Minnesota, that's how marriage is seen. It's a marriage contract. And when people say, well, that's just a piece of paper. Well, yeah, that is true in the state of Minnesota. It's just a contract, a civil contract through the state. And that's how they see marriage. Now, that's not what the sacrament of matrimony is. The contract does happen with the state of Minnesota at the same time as the sacrament, but it's much deeper because the sacrament of matrimony is a covenant. And a covenant is almost entirely different than a contract. A covenant says, I will do my part regardless of whether you do your part or not. It doesn't matter if you don't fulfill your part of this covenant. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep going. Covenants were started by God. Contracts were kind of invented, I guess, by human beings. But covenants, God started the first covenant way, way back in the Old Testament. And he said to his people, I will never leave you or forsake you. It doesn't matter what you do. Hopefully you do good. Hopefully you love me back. But even if you don't, I'm not going anywhere. And that's a covenant. And the sacrament of matrimony is modeled on that covenant between God and his people. So when Shelley and I were married in the Catholic Church, we said to each other, basically, we said, I'm not going anywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter. In the bad times, I'm sticking around. And we decided that. And I think the other two couples would say the same thing today. I know they would. So anyway, that's the difference between a covenant and a contract. You're not entering a contract here. I mean, you are in the state of Minnesota's eyes, but you're entering a covenant in the sacrament of matrimony. It's a very different thing and a much deeper thing. Okay. So marriage is not this, matrimony is not this private little thing where just the two of you, you love each other. Oh, it's all it takes. No, it's actually a public thing because it symbolizes Christ's love for the church. So we're setting a huge example. And that example hopefully is good, but sadly, sometimes it can be not so good, I guess. But it's a public thing, okay? And number one job as a spouse.
Yep.
Go ahead.
To get Patrick to heaven, to continue to love him and to help him get to heaven. And so to pray for him, to encourage him in his prayer life, encourage him in his work, encourage him with our children, to just be, like we talked earlier, his biggest fan, to be the president of his fan club. And
same for me with Shelley. So if you sampled most couples, I'm guessing, just in the general public and said, what's your biggest job as a spouse, to your husband, to your wife? Most people probably say, oh, to help them be happy, to make them happy. And that's not what it is in matrimony. That's nice if that happens, and it does happen. But the number one job isn't to make each other happy. It's because happiness is actually fairly superficial. You can be happy 1 minute, and the next minute, oh, something happens, and oh, I'm not. It's fleeting. But holiness, to help each other get to heaven, to make each other better, to call each other on, to be better people in our relationships with God and other people, that's permanent stuff. That's big time stuff. And that's our number one job. Okay. And I have to ask you the question, we have to ask you the question, are you up for this? Think about it. Is this something you're willing to take on? Because when you stand at the altar and you make your vows in the sacrament of matrimony, this is what you're saying, that you're going to help your spouse get to heaven. And it's a wonderful job, but it is a big job, okay? And it's not just to make them happy by buying them something or doing something like that. That's nice, that's good, but that's not the job. The job is to help each other get to
saints, to be holy.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Are you willing to sacrifice? Because it always takes some sacrifice. Shelley is the most generous person that I know. She is always thinking of other people. She's just inspiring to me. She actually is so generous, so loving. She's made me better. She has. And I might have done one or two things in our 34 years that helped it. No, I'm probably not, but she's made me better.
And it's not a 50-50. Sometimes Patrick has to give, more than that, and I can only give a little bit to the relationship. We really have had times in our relationship that have been rocky. There are times that, he was looking for new work, and that wasn't always easy. There's time that we have moved, and that hasn't been easy. Our child has been sick, or has had mental health issues, and that hasn't been easy.
Tell them what your mom said at your wedding.
Oh, so
this is right before she walked down the aisle.
Yes, right before I'm ready to walk down the aisle. My mom's very German, so very few words. But so the music started. I had both my mom and dad ready to walk me down the aisle, and she turned to me. She said, "Honey, I just want to tell you, there'll be years." And then the music started, and I walked down the aisle. And so Patrick and I were on our honeymoon, and I said, my mom said the funniest thing. She said, "Honey, there'll be years." And we sat there and talked about that.
What?
And talked about, oh my gosh, my mom's been unhappy for years. What is she talking about? And it really came down to, as I look back now over these last 34 years, there are seasons in our relationship. And there are times that are just really highs, and there are times that have been struggles. But it is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so what she was trying to tell me is, hang in there, honey. that it's all worth
There'll be
it.
some ups and downs.
Yeah, there'll be ups and downs,
But it's a covenant, right? And when your spouse is down, that's not a time to walk away. That's a time to press in, if anything else, right? Okay. So what does the sacrament of matrimony actually do? Because sacraments are supposed to actually do something. It's not just that we give something at a sacrament, but we actually do something. They're not magic. So in other words, what you bring together up to the altar when you enter into that covenant, what you bring together doesn't just magically get fixed or changed in the sacrament. We have to be open to God's grace. I mean, God is the glue who holds us together. He really is. I mentioned that before, but God's grace is present in the sacrament in a big way. Sometimes in ways we don't even know. I think in a lot of ways we don't even know. But it's not magic. We have to be open to it. We have to tell God that yes, we want you in this. He doesn't just automatically. He's a gentleman. He doesn't just push his way into our lives. He waits until he's invited. And so will you invite him? That's a big deal. Sacraments and the sacrament of matrimony is kind of like an outlet, right? On the wall. If you looked around where you're sitting right now and you looked at an outlet and you walked up to it and you put your hand near the outlet. Okay, let's say you put your hand up close to the outlet. Would you feel the electricity? Would you connect with the electricity? Well, no, you wouldn't. Actually, it wouldn't be a good idea if you did, but you wouldn't, because you actually have to plug in to the outlet. You can't just leave a plug lying on the floor near the outlet. You have to actually plug into it. And that's kind of what it is with the sacrament of matrimony. The sacrament puts the outlet there for you. But if you just leave it there, stay unplugged, that's all it is. It's not magic. You have to take yourself, in a sense, and plug yourself in as a couple to that outlet, so that in that metaphor of God's electricity can move through your marriage. It's not magic. It's not something that just happens by accident. You need to plug in. That's why it's kind of a metaphor of this outlet. Okay. God's grace. We know we're loved. We can love each other better. Our ability to love each other is finite. I mentioned that way back at the beginning.
God's ability to love is infinite. One of the things that helped me is I heard someone at a talk that I went to, or a book that I read, to write 10 wonderful things about why I married Patrick, 10 reasons why. And I placed it in my Bible early on when we were first married. And there were days where I was just like, really? He chooses food funny, or man, he doesn't match his clothes, or you start having those questions. And when I would go to my prayer time, I'd see my Bible, and instead of letting those things become things that were nitpicky and I wanted to nag about, I began to read why it is I love this man so much. And so I could remember that he's very generous and he is faithful. And those things on the list, I could just renew my mind about those things, because the little things we can't start nagging, and we want to, because we want to bring change. And women, we think that nagging will help, but it doesn't help. And so we just need to encourage and to love.
I made a list of 10 things too for Shelley, and I've added to them. I'm up to like 387 now. But anyway, well, no, there's a lot, but it is actually, it's kind of a cool practice. Somebody told me that because you do go through periods where things are wonderful and sometimes things are a little tougher, and so they said, well, make a list and then take it out 3 times a day and just read it 3 times a day. And it was amazing after 2 or 3 or 4 weeks of doing that. It's incredible how that sort of seeps into your being. You just kind of start to remember and start to think about it more and more and dwell on the good things, because there is so much good. And then God can use that. And again, his ability to love is infinite. There is no end to it. We as humans always run out sometime. Not that it goes away forever, but we come to an end of ourselves. And then who is there to help us love? God. Because his his sort of pool of love never runs out. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, there was a whole movie of me, and I'm pretty old, so it was like a
Black and white?
yeah, black and white, 8 millimeter, whatever, back in the day. But I was on the shore of Gull Lake up near Nisswa, right? Nisswa, Brainerd. And I had a little bucket, and I was going down, scooping water out of Gull Lake and walking about 10, 15 feet up on the shore and dumping the water into a hole I had made. And I did that over and over again several times in this little video. I'm sure it was hilarious. I haven't seen it for years. But somebody finally asked me on film, Patrick, what are you doing? And I said, I'm moving the lake. Well, in a 5-year-old mind or 6-year-old mind, somehow I thought I could do that. And yet looking now, of course, everybody just laughed and thought that was so funny, because of course it is. There's no way I would move Gull Lake. Well, that's kind of how we see the difference between the way we see things and the way God sees things. God is infinite. It's like me and with my little bucket thinking I can move the lake, and yet God is so much bigger than that, so much bigger. There's no way I could run out of lake to move ever, So anyway, just a little metaphor. So, and people have been good about mentioning these things. And this PowerPoint is on our website if you ever want to go back and look at it.
The Spaniels mentioned this,
yeah.
and the fun signs.
Pray for people,
pray
go
for
to
each
Mass, pray with each other. If you've never prayed together, one way you could do it that we've heard of that works well is you could just sit next to each other and say, okay, we're each going to pray. You could just sit there silently and pray for a minute or two. And then after that, just look at each other and tell each other what you prayed for. That's praying together.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe move on to some rote prayers. Our Father's, Hail Mary, Glory be, any of those things. I mean, so you can pray together even if you've never done it, in a way that isn't too threatening, okay? All right, and you see the rest, and you've heard them from all the other wonderful presenters today. Okay.
One of my favorite things is to think of it as a dance, both my relationship with Patrick and my relationship with God. So guidance, God, you, and I dance, okay? When I went on retreat many years ago, again, early on in our marriage, I was really struggling with what other people thought about me, about Patrick, about our relationship. I was just so caught up in all of that. And the Lord reminded me that it's a dance, and it's a dance between, obviously between my husband and I and God. And he had this wonderful dance plan. And I kind of had this poem that I came up with, and I want to share it with you. It goes like this. I want to dance with you, my child. There's nothing I greater adore. To hold you in my arms, let me lead, and together we will soar. Don't look around and be distracted, or dance like others do. For when you do it my way, the dance is forever new. Again, I must remind you, and gently place your chin to look into my eyes only. Are you ready? Let's begin. It's so true. This needs to be your relationship. It's your relationship with God. It's your relationship with the person that's sitting next to you. And it is a beautiful dance. And it's ever new as you keep your eyes focused on God.
It is about the relationship. It really is. And we often think, I think a lot of people think that God and the church, and there's all these rules. The only reason that there's kind of rules and guidelines is to help us in our relationship with God and with each other. That's why they're there. They're not there to encumber us or to imprison us. They're there to free us, because if you take a relationship with God and with other people out of any of these things, all of a sudden it just looks like rules. But if you put the relationship back in and understand that's the core of all of this, what we're talking about today, relationship with God and with each other, if you put that in there, it's like, it kind of makes sense. Why would NFP make sense? It's about a relationship. It's about relationship. You can't take that out. If you do, then it just looks like rules. Um, and I'm going to say one other thing. We are built for relationships. That's the reason for our existence on this earth. There is no other reason that we're here. We're here for relationships with God, with other people. You've heard this many times probably. Somebody on their deathbed, right? They never say, God, I wish I would have worked more. God, I wish I had more money. Gee, I wish I, was more famous. They never say that. They say things like, if only I was getting along with my son. If only I knew my brother and sister better. If only, that's the kind of stuff they say. They only think about relationships in those last hours, days. That's why we're made. That's why we're here. Okay. Anyway, keep the idea of the relationship in there. Okay, so we talked about the triangle between us and God. If we have a triangle like this, and the closer we get in our relationship with God, actually the triangle sort of shrinks and we get closer to each other. So that's kind of what that triangle metaphor is. Okay, and we want your marriages to, even though they're good right now, your relationship to be great, not just to be good. Good is fine. Good is okay. But if this is the most important relationship in your life, human relationship, you and your spouse, you and your future spouse, then you're going to need to put, and you'll want to put the most effort into it of any relationship you have. It just makes sense. It's not one to be taken for granted. Don't give your fiance the leftovers. Give them the best, right? Give them the best.
I just want to do a little shout out. I talked about nagging earlier. Oftentimes, guys, I want you to hear this. As women, we tend to nag because we're wanting more relationship. And so that's kind of how we go after it. And it's not the right thing all the time. And I don't like that. Sometimes as a woman, I, tend to start to pick on him. But what I'm really trying to do is, hey, I'm over here. Hey, I want you to pay attention to how I feel and what I'm thinking. And when men kind of aren't interested or don't want to talk about it, that's hard too. So you have to be open.
Sometimes guys tend to avoid, and that can be a tendency. I want to mention two other things as we wrap up this talk, and one of them is they're both things that are topical and things that are becoming, I'd say, more of a problem for sure since the whole Corona thing started. And this was difficult before and a problem before, but now it's according to statistics, it's epidemic. Pornography. We didn't want to go through this whole day without mentioning it because I'll just say this: it affects men more than women. We know that, but sadly, women are it's becoming a much bigger problem. No matter how good your relationship is, pornography will always make it worse. Always. There's no way around it. It may not destroy your relationship, although as we talk to people in the marriage tribunal who deal with annulments, in other words, folks who've been divorced and they're seeking an annulment, they mentioned that pornography has been a problem in almost all of the broken marriages, almost all. And not that it was the major cause always, but sometimes it was. And it will always make your relationship and marriage worse, always. I guarantee it. And, if you want to look up statistics about this or anything, you can find them. It's not a neutral activity. It just isn't. And as much as the world would like to tell you it is, it's a lie. It's not a neutral thing. It'll always make it worse.
So we're asking you to address that and address it as a couple and make sure that you really work hard to, have a pure relationship and how you look at those things and at each other. And it's a hard thing to talk about, but it's really important.
We have two websites on the back of this workbook that address pornography. and they're both excellent. If you're interested in looking those up, feel free. We would encourage you.
Just a quick mention, on the last marriage course, there was a young woman that boldly spoke to the rest of the women about how her first marriage ended because her husband did not want to give up pornography. It was very hard on the relationship. And we've had couples that speak at marriage course where the men have struggled before and they have overcome with grace, with counseling. It is something that can be overcome, but it is work, and it's something to communicate about.
It's not a neutral thing, guys. Don't buy that lie. The other one is living together. And we'll just identify the elephant in the room. We know that from your signups, about half of you are right now, at least that have told us that. We would encourage you, if you're living together, to consider living apart. Because again, statistically, when a couple lives together before marriage, especially when they live together before they're engaged, the statistics are not as good for a solid marriage. And you can look those up. Take my word for it. But if you would choose to move apart, if you would choose, even if you can't get out of a lease, choose to be in separate bedrooms and live and not sleep together, that would help. And I know that sounds like we're just being, I don't know, old-fashioned. It's not old-fashioned.
It'll really give you a chance to work on your relationship and communication. And then when you come together in marriage, it'll be that much more beautiful. Because how odd, you wake up on your wedding day and you're in the same bed, and then you go get married and then you end up in the same bed. We're encouraging you to make this kind of a new start. And God is all about new starts too. And so it's something to have a conversation about and to really consider before your big day.
Yep. So prayerfully consider it. I know that will come up when you're doing work with your sponsor couple, and also probably when you work with the parish priest or deacon or whoever does marriage stuff at your parish, will probably come up. And so consider it. It will actually, even if you are living together now, if you split up, if you live separately, even if you move to separate bedrooms, it will make a difference. It actually will.
We were a sponsor couple at one point, and the couple decided to do that, and they were so grateful.
Yeah.
They said it was just giddy on their wedding day. It was giddy because they had so much to look forward to. And so that is super, super something to look at and think about. So those are a couple hard topics to end with, but
we're going to give you 10 minutes to go through the faith questions in here. Please go through those.
Fill out those evaluations.
Fill out the evaluations, yep. So the faith questions. Do some writing, please. Please do some writing and then talk about it. We'll see you back here at 5 minutes to 3.
You don't want to miss the last part.
5 minutes to 3.
All right, here we go.
Thanks, guys.